Welcome to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, where we aim to break down barriers, demystify blindness, and promote real and lasting change. Join host David Steinmetz as he connects us with professionals who are making a positive impact in the community. These leaders help empower individuals who are blind or have other disabilities to live a full and inclusive life. Let's lean in as David kicks off today's conversation.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, David Steinmetz, and I've said over and over again on this show that we often form our perceptions or view of the world on a lot of the things, our past experience, society or social norms, public policy, things that try and make everything good for everybody. But I think the biggest influence on our perception nowadays is our family and how we grew up in our home, what our parents taught us, those family values, etc. And when you are brought up in a environment where everybody is typically looks like you associate. Or maybe you have that mixture of culture and so forth. And when something new like a disability is introduced to that culture, introduced into those norms, how do you deal with that change? And a lot of times that's very difficult, whether it's from a family perspective, individual, or from a corporation. And we talk on this show all the time about how organizations can change their perspective, and with diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, as well as interacting with and getting to know people in your community and interacting with people who are blind or people with disabilities. And so my show, Changing Perception of Blindness, or CPB, is really focused on bringing awareness to business leaders, to the community, and to the general public about blindness. Because I think the more that you know, the more you can be familiar, the more chances you have an opportunity to gain knowledge is better for everybody, as well as it will break those myths about blindness. We hear all the time in the blindness community, people who are sighted that don't believe that they would be able to ever survive if they lost their vision. And I thought that way at one point in my life too, is how am I going to do this? And you learn that it's not as scary as you think it is, right? Whenever we're faced with change, we always kind of take a very slow approach to it because we don't know what's on the other side. So today I am really excited because we're going to have a conversation with my brothers, Michael, Jeffrey, and Gregory Steinmetz. And we're going to talk a little bit about maybe some of those family values and changes and things that we had to overcome as brothers, as a family. And then what does that bring each one of us to our daily lives now when we look at disability, maybe in the workplace, or disability in the community, and what does that look like, and so forth. So I'm really excited. Let's get the conversation rolling. I'm going to introduce the oldest of the four, Mike. If you just give a little background about yourself, where you work, and then we'll pass it down the line.
Sure. Good morning, David. I'm Mike Steinmetz. I live in Sherman Oaks, California. Born and raised here in Los Angeles. I am the oldest of the four of us. I work for a company called Teladoc Health. And as we talk a little further, I think it's really important that, as David said, what I've learned in our family, I'm able to bring to my employer and my job, and stand up for inclusion and equity.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. You're up.
Hey, I'm Jeff. Yep, Jeff Steinmetz. I live in Chatsworth, California, and I am a director of IT for a nationwide merchant musical instrument retailer. And I think with the family, values and changes that we've had to deal with, I've got a new appreciation for the vision impaired, and helps me, I think, at least consider some of that in the workplace.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Greg, you're up.
Hey, David. So I'm Greg Steinmetz. I'm the youngest of the four boys. I also live in Sherman Oaks, California. I work at Guide Dogs of America in Los Angeles as a senior manager of admissions and graduate services. And I am also blind and am working and living with my vision loss.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. And, it's kind of funny as I was thinking about this show today and how we're going to kind of formulate this conversation. And I think I kind of look back at how, we grew up as kids and, playing tackle football in the front yard, and it seemed like it was the two oldest against the two youngest and everything, which doesn't always seem to be fair when you look at the size difference of Mike compared to me, being as tall as he is. But it was always funny, as well as, how we were brought up to, in the community, and how we think about things. And then one day I got this diagnosis after sitting in a doctor's chair for, basically 8 hours with instruments that looked like they should belong in Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory. And how that one day kind of really changed, our perspective. And so from there, basically, the entire family was tested and evaluated. And Greg, as you mentioned, you also are living with retinitis pigmentosa. Can you guys, anybody, want to share maybe a little bit about that first initial conversation about blindness? And I'd love to hear from both, Greg and Mike and Jeff, from kind of that opposite perception.
Sure. I mean, for me, I remember it was more than probably at least 35 years ago. I was a teenager and remember that David had been diagnosed first, and really didn't understand what all this meant. At I don't know, 15, 16, maybe somewhere around there, that that diagnosis didn't really register, that I could be blind at some point. And I remember going to UCLA and doing all those tests and finding out that I had RP as well. And I think it kind of changed some of the trajectory and how I looked at stuff, and took a long time to admit and accept what that diagnosis meant as I got older, and some of the significant changes in my vision that led to having to stop driving at 20 years old, and being a father with vision loss, having to change jobs, and going through the denial that that's not me, and avoiding using a white cane. I mean, all the kind of standard things that people kind of go through with a transition of vision loss. So it was kind of a challenge for me to get to a level where I could live with the day-to-day of vision loss.
Thanks for sharing
Yeah,
that.
I think from my perspective, like Greg said, it was 30 something years ago. and there wasn't a lot of information around RP and what it meant. And I don't think that at the time when David was first diagnosed, that I really took it seriously. The impact of what that would mean to David and Greg and the rest of the family really never registered with me. And I think part of that is also um, me being a different time in my life, sort of being older and perhaps starting my adult life. I wasn't as involved then with the younger brothers as I am even today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, anything you want to add, or?
I think similar to Mike. I mean, I recall, that time of a lot of, some concern. Dave, I recall, I think there was an automobile situation that, that initiated this, and all of us, going to eventually get tested. Not really sure, all what was going on, or, what it all meant, like Mike said. I recall going through the testing and the the genetic testing, etc. And ultimately, for me, I was deemed diagnosed as a carrier of the gene, but didn't have the active, I guess, RP, and I guess, thinking back, maybe at that time didn't really realize how it had affected me or any of us, and like Mike said, kind of living my life at that time. And, over time, obviously have seen the impacts of that and changes to you guys and our family. And, now even as a with my kids, right. And I now have grandkids, right. And are they susceptible, right, to the same, RP is something that still impacts and affects me and future generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I appreciate you guys sharing that, because I agree with all of you. So I'm struggling here with holding back a cough. But what I think we found is that what we didn't know is what we didn't know. And until we had, changes in my vision, I realized there was more to this hereditary degenerative retinal disease. And so as I continue to progress through this process and journey, it's trying to think ahead of that next step. And again, oftentimes we're just kind of forced into things when if we don't take that proactive approach. And for me, I think I took the more forceful way instead of being proactive. And if it happens to me, it happens to me, kind of thing. But and it's interesting, Greg, you talked about some of the things that a lot of people who are blind go through, and the adjustment and so forth. And I think it's important that when we're going through these things that we find people to talk about it, right? Because it's either a small group. I didn't know anybody who was blind until you get into the blindness field, until you become blind, or you buy a new car, and all of a sudden everybody has the same car as you. So it seems a little ironic in terms of how the blindness kind of picture. When we look at things from a perspective and from maybe like a business perspective, how has knowing what blindness is and interpret, what do you guys think about how has it impacted you guys and your job?
Well, for me, back when we started out and were diagnosed, there wasn't the internet. We couldn't do research easily, couldn't connect with other people, or learn about ways to do things different, technologies, and so on. So for me, I started off working my initial career in the funeral services industry. I didn't have any technology or even aware of anything that could help me do my job better or easier. And so, I left my job and went through the California Department of Rehab to get training and go back to school and learn that, there are ways to adjust your environment to make your job easier. And that included orientation mobility training. I think peer counseling helped because although our family are great resources, sometimes it's easier to be able to share with someone else that's either going through or been through similar. And then the technology and career counseling through the Department of Rehab were really important to get back out and have a good career in a well-paying position in a different industry, but still in a management role. And so learning, how to do those things was really important. I was resistant at first, but realized that doing it would benefit me and my future. So I think getting out and getting training, and now obviously the technology is so much better than it was 20, 25 years ago with the advent of wearable technologies and AI and so forth. So having those technologies really made my current job so much more doable. And it's nice to have an organization and an employer that's supportive of that, and taking and assisting proactively to make sure that I have the tools to be able to do the job that I need to do.
David, Greg said something about support, and I was just thinking as we were talking that this might be the first time the four of us have ever sat down and talked about this subject. All four of us. I mean, I know I've had conversations with each of you separately, but I don't think as the four of us we've ever really talked about how this impacts us.
I agree, and I thought about that when I invited you guys to come on and have this conversation. Is we really don't discuss it, at least not openly in a group, like you said, individually for sure. And it's I hope that we can continue to do that, but having a conversation or hearing from Greg or from me or you, Mike and Jeff, your perspective or perception of what things were, how things are, and what we're doing to advocate and make change, I think is really going to be beneficial to us as well as to the community, because that's really what we want to make a bigger impact on.
Yeah. So your question, I think, David, was sort of how does our life experience living with visually impaired folks in our family affect our job? And so I'll touch on that real quick. That the company that I work for, Teladoc Health, we provide services to the general population, and that we have a website, we have an application. All of that is we're really striving to make all of that accessible to people with visual impairment. And I've gotten involved with a subgroup that focuses on both our own internal tools and products, as well as just supporting colleagues who have various disabilities, including vision. And it's really refreshing and a positive experience to see that there are people out there that are taking into account the issues that you and Greg face in terms of access and having the ability to use your assistive technology in a way that makes sense. And just as an aside, one of the things that I think is so funny when I talk to the developers in our organization and they talk about that they are developing for screen readers, and I say, have you ever tested it like my brothers use their screen readers, which is like at a 5 times speed of talking, and heard how it sounds in real life, and they're sort of dumbfounded. They just test everything at normal rate. And my experience listening to you guys is that that's not real life. And so that's been something very interesting to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of organizations, right, that are really focusing on that inclusion, accessibility, and so forth, and making sure digital accessibility is for all. And they don't do a lot of testing, or they don't get direct user feedback from that testing. And great to hear that the Teladoc has that initiative. They have the teams that are working on making sure it's inclusive for everybody. And I think it's important because you also talked not just external, right, but internal. When an organization it makes that commitment to hire somebody with a disability, that you're bringing in teams to make sure that it is actually doing what you hope it to do, so that you can bring on the labor force that you want to tap into of talented people and make sure that they can do their job.
Yeah, I would say that, especially for, it's good that businesses and corporations are making their applications and websites accessible. I think, like you said, David, I think that internally, though, that we have to make sure that that information is accessible as well, so that if you're at a meeting or a webinar, that there are ways to make sure that the information is accessible, whether it's a PowerPoint or webinar presentation, or video, that it's has a includes a description, because that can limit interaction or information to us as people who are blind or visually impaired.
Greg, you need to slide over a little bit to your left. There you go.
Oh, perfect, Greg.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Greg, you mentioned something that a couple of minutes ago about when you were experiencing more vision loss, you changed jobs, or you left funeral business. Was that is there a reason for that? Were you feeling that you couldn't do the job because you didn't have the technology or training? What made you leave that job?
I think some of it was that, and some of it was my own kind of perception and understanding of what the job required of transportation, and being out in the public, and so the physical part of the job, I just couldn't see doing, even with the level of vision that I had at the time. Obviously, I wasn't driving, so that was one hurdle. But being able to read documents and contracts and getting signatures, and then just dealing with the day-to-day aspects of that type of work. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the the real kind of things, was part of it was knowing what I would need to do, and knowing what maybe some of my limitations would be, without really knowing what was possible because of training. So that was one of the bigger reasons that I changed careers and went back to school, and went for training through local organizations like the Braille Institute or the now, it's not no longer around, but the Center for Partially Sighted, and realizing that there were resources available to make those jobs and tasks easier and doable. And so that was kind of the reason for changing careers.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly, the heart of this show is not knowing, right? Is not knowing what blindness is, not knowing what to expect tomorrow. For those living with, RP, where your vision is decreasing on a day-to-day basis, to employers who are trying to hire somebody that says, well, they're blind. How are they going to read this contract, or how are they going to access that information? And that's, I think, is the biggest hurdle, stumbling block from one, the disability community, and two, from the employer's perspective. And through this show, through advocacy, the work that you guys do, we hope to break down those barriers and changes. We got a little background noise. I'm not sure which one that is, but hopefully it's not too loud or disturbing for anybody else.
I'm not hearing anything.
You don't hear anything? All right. It just must be the rats running around in my brain. So, Jeff, what do you think about, this experience? You mentioned that you're talking about, you being a carrier, your kids and your grandkids and future generations of potential blindness in the family. How does that make you or impact you in terms of your advocacy of the work that you do in supporting the blindness community, as well as just, your perception, right? Greg said that he didn't think he could do the job that he's doing. Where do you see for you or your family, what does blindness look like to you?
Well, I think first and foremost, as a carrier, right, of the gene, and potentially passing that on to my kids or grandkids and so on and so forth. I mean, it weighs on me, right? As I think back to some of our experience, right, and where did this come from, and who was the person that gave this to us, right, type of thing, and ultimately, is there guilt around that, right? But and I pray or hope that none of my family or grandkids or whatever are affected by that down the line. Quite frankly, I've thought about, like, how do I help my grandkids today potentially prepare for something like that if it were to come to be, right? And whether it's trying to help teach them Braille or those types of things early on, just as a just exposure to that. Sure. But I think looking at, from my perception and my experience with my relationship with it, with both you and Greg, I mean, I think you guys have overcome so much, right? And I admire the jobs that you guys do in both advocating for blindness or people who are visually impaired, as well as your places in the workplace and all the accomplishments that you guys have done there. I mean, I think it's a great example of your vision loss or impairment not holding you back. I remember for a long while, I mean, I think, Greg, you mentioned it about denial and anger and this and that, and I think acceptance, and you guys have done a lot of work to overcome and participate in fully, right? So, I mean, David, I think the video of you going out skiing, not too long ago, and was amazing and inspirational. And, I think where I'm at, from a professional career and where I'm at in life, I think about with the time that I have left, what have I done or what can I do to help maybe make things easier in the workplace, or careers for
Mhm.
those who may be visually impaired or other you know impairments, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. And that's always that tough question is, again, being proactive versus reactive, and um, knowing that you can still live a full, inclusive life, do 99% of things that you want to do, and we always come up with these big grand plans that, oh, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, because of something else. But if you really wouldn't have done that, then what's the difference, right? And for example, I thought, oh, how am I going to take my kids camping? So I mean, and then turn around and go, well, I don't really take my kids camping anyway. So if I do, we can take the kids camping, and as an entire family or friends or someone camping with everyone's yard, whatever it is. But we think about all the things we can't do when we're faced with these challenges, and are those really realistic issues? And I think we forget that sometimes as we go through.
David, I was thinking that like, I think you and Greg are the first blind people that I've known. Um,
Mhm.
I think when we were growing up, Greg had a friend who was blind, but um, you guys are the sort of the example for me in terms of um, how people with a visual impairment uh, can take on life, can take on the world, um, and I find it just I guess mind blowing is the word when I see pretty much on a day to day basis what Greg is able to do, and live independently, and I don't mean to be deprecating at all, Greg, but it's just it's amazing to see you navigate your world and do so successfully and confidently. And David, same to you. Both of you have accomplished so much. Um, and the thing that it's there's a little bit of guilt on my part that I'm not affected, that
Mhm.
I'm not a carrier, that I'm not affected by this um, condition. And so that's always in the back of my head, nagging at me a little bit.
Mhm. Hmm. Well, I never knew that there was some of that guilt associated with it. I guess we can say from me as the blind brother. Sorry, I keep trying to hold back my cough and it makes me talk funny. Is the fact that we say "why me" a lot of times, right?
Hmm.
And um, didn't think about that from the other perspective. Why not me, or whatever else. So thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Sure.
Because I think it's interesting to know these things. It's important to share them. It's also gives insight to the world of blindness, and that what we think things aren't really that. And it's until we embrace it, until we say, from an employer's perspective, I'm going to take this initiative. I'm going to get the buy-in all the way down the chain, make sure supervisors and managers and so forth are all on board to this vision of hiring people who are blind and building systems to ensure that the information is accessible, the technology is there, reasonable accommodations are so minimal that, and a lot of times free for the some of the assistive technology, that, there shouldn't be a reason why. But I think in this conversation, we're hearing exactly why is we don't know. First person, that we were ever introduced to who is blind is ourselves. And I see my kids go out into the world. I think they're more compassionate. They see things, and if they do see somebody who's blind and may be heading into danger, whatever else, or capable of going up and talking comfortably to somebody who is blind, and having that conversation to make sure, one, that person's safe, and two, to be good citizens and so forth. And I have you you guys ever felt how to make those connections, or that growth in the blindness community? Are there things that you do maybe to support the blindness community, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I actually had that similar experience that you just described at the mall a couple of weeks ago. My wife and I were just walking through the mall, and there was a person with a white cane, and it appeared to me that the person perhaps was disoriented or lost as to where they were. Mm-hmm. And I stopped for just a moment just to check in with them and ask them if they needed any assistance. Are they okay? And they told me they were, and so I was able to walk on. But I don't think that I would have had that awareness had not been around you guys before. Mm-hmm. As far as my support, I think I've told this story a lot of times, but you, David and Greg, you guys are both guide dog users, and we were at graduation one day when you got one of your dogs, and my wife said we should do something to give back for the wonderful things that these dogs do for you guys. And I thought I was going to go donate some money, and instead she went and signed me up, she'll say, to be a puppy raiser for Guide Dogs of America. And we've raised 4 puppies to this point, and it's allowed me to meet a lot of great individuals with a similar purpose of helping others. I've also met a lot of other people who are recipients of the dogs, and has really broadened my horizons in that respect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I'm fortunate I get paid to help others who are blind or visually impaired. So, I get to get out to a lot of different, conventions for the national consumer groups and local organizations, webinars and presentations, and kind of share information about, guide dog mobility in general, my experience with technology and training. So, I have found that, just like vision loss is a spectrum, so are everyone's experiences and, background and knowledge. So, for me, it's rewarding to be able to, share with others, that there are ways to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Certainly times are more challenging than others, but if it's something that's important, you'll find a way to do it. And that living with vision loss, or I imagine most other disabilities, can be hard, but it's becomes part of your day to day, and not really much that you really have to think about. And I find most people are open to that, and willing to assist, and but don't know what to ask, or how to assist. So for me, it's always, hey, it's nothing wrong with saying, do you need assistance, or how may I help you? Opening, kind of like the idea of your show is, what are perceptions, right? So a lot of people don't know about vision loss or blindness, don't know what the challenges are, how they can help. And I think sometimes comes from the individual with the vision loss, what know what they need and how to ask for and advocate, and be open to assistance.
Just don't grab your dog's leash.
Right, or me.
Right, yeah. How many times you get steered into, here you go this way, and try and steer you. Yeah, I mean, Greg, you said that sometimes it's difficult, but life is difficult for everybody at times, and
Sure.
it's how we manage those times. And it's important to make sure that we're focused on the end game and not right where I'm at, and making sure that you find that alternate way versus giving something up, whether it's disability related or just life in general is
Agreed.
hard.
For sure.
So,
David, I was going to ask you, I mean, yeah. I know you advocate, right, for the disabled, visually impaired in terms of being able to, in the workplace find employment, right? And I know AIB does a lot to help support that and employ those. What do you find is like the biggest challenges for, and maybe opportunities for, the visually impaired being able to find employment more readily?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think the biggest barrier for employment for people who are blind and people with disabilities is the perception. Digital accessibility is a barrier, as well as transportation and things like that. But I think it's the focus comes into is how is somebody who is blind going to do the job? And if you can't get over that thought, you can't get beyond the disability, then we'll continue to see 70% unemployment among people who are blind and vision impaired, people with disabilities. And I think there are programs now, as Greg mentioned, through vocation rehabilitation and others that are training people with disabilities to be successful in the workplace. But we find that, it's 2 years after you go through this program is about the average before finding a job. And I think that comes really from that fact that I've never had an experience or encounter with someone who is blind. I don't have the vision to see how somebody who is blind can do the job. And as Greg mentioned, the technology, it's there to do just about everything else, but it's not always there for everything. But it is getting better, and the more we advocate for it, I think the bigger impact we will have.
Yeah.
Because I know, you guys are out there doing that as well, Jeff. You support with Guide Dogs of America, with Greg, and convention and conferences. And you traveled recently to Texas for a conference. And yeah. It's I think often interesting to see is that I think the disability community kind of mirrors general population, obviously, but right, you have people who are confident, people, cane users in their orientation and mobility, in their technology skills, and then you find those that are always seeking assistance and so forth, or are less confident in their orientation mobility, need more kind of guidance and so forth. And I think sometimes that breaks down into why there's unemployment as well, is that we need to make sure that if you're going to apply for a job, in the times that I did after graduating college, I had a great resume. You get in the door, and then there's this person's blind. We're done with this interview. And so you got to make sure that skills and the job descriptions match your skills and things that you're applying for. Also don't impact that unemployment.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the conference. I did have an opportunity to go with Greg to, I think, to Houston, I think earlier this year for a national conference for the blind, and it was very, I'll say, eye-opening. Like you said, to see me, you talked about our experience and interaction with people who are visually impaired, right? And typically it was either or it's you and Greg, or maybe Guide Dogs community, but there was hundreds and if not thousands of people, right, individuals who come to this conference for the blind, and have classes and seminars and things like that. And there's a show there that had different booths of technology and different offerings and services, and like you said, saw so many people at different stages of their I guess in their journey, right? And like you said, some that were maybe newly experiencing vision loss, etc. And it was amazing to me to see how people, how those individuals, right, maneuvered through the conference, and some had more confidence, right, than others, and you would really not even know, right, that maybe they were at vision loss. But yeah, it's definitely eye-opening to me and my experience from that, and the services and technology that's out there and how that's assisting. And it makes me how can I get involved right, that have been afflicted with vision loss, or have vision loss.
I touched on it a moment ago, but it's always amazing to me to see how little the general public knows how to deal with people with vision loss and blindness. Even our own family members still say to David and Greg, "It's over there," or "Come over here," and there just needs to be so much more education on how to help people, how to interact with people. Forget about helping them, right?
Yeah, and I think people are afraid. Right? I know, and like you said, in our family, we don't say the word blind. We'll say, "Oh, you can't see well," or something else to avoid the blindness and saying the word, and that's part of who I am. And so it's not something that should be scared to talk about or say the word. So absolutely, I think education, early on is so important. So we're butting up on our time here today, and so I want to give everybody an opportunity to kind of again talk about your organization if you want. Or any last closing moments, any words that you guys want to give?
I'll just say, Dave, thanks for setting this up and coming up with this this particular episode. I really enjoyed sitting down with you all and talking through this. Like you said, Mike, we haven't really ever done this before, so it's always good to do, in public, across, the entire internet. But thanks for setting it up, Dave.
Yeah, we're going to go big.
Exactly.
And nobody cried.
And we're all being much too nice to each other.
Exactly.
But I'm not here representing my organization today, but I will say that Teladoc Health is a great place to work. I would encourage that if you're looking for employment, check out the website and see if there's any careers that suit you. Also, make a plug that Guide Dogs of America here in Los Angeles, Southern California, is looking for puppy raisers. So I will put that plug out there too. And David, again, like Jeff just said, thanks for putting this together. It was really a lot of fun to participate and share with everyone.
Greg, any closing thoughts or comments?
I'm not sure Greg's still here.
Oh, all right. I'll be that way. So I'll go ahead and then kind of wrap up here. And again, thank you guys. Thanks for sharing, some personal things and some insights into your perspectives from journey through the blindness. I apologize for my voice and shakiness and conversation as I continue to heal here. And I'd like to thank Arizona Industries for the Blind, an enterprise nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people who are blind or visually impaired to achieve their version of their version of their American dream by creating and sustaining employment. So it's really great for them to sponsor my show again. And I hope that we have proven that with the right training, the right technology, and the right attitude, people who are blind can be successful in the workplace. Thank you.